You know, that exact moment, right?
Yeah.
You finally drop onto the couch after a 10-hour Tuesday that felt like a month.
Oh, yeah. We all know that feeling.
Right. You grab the remote, fire up your favorite streaming service, and you just let out that long sigh.
Just completely checking out for the day.
Exactly. And in that moment, you probably think you're just relaxing, you know, kicking back, choosing to be entertained.
You feel like you're the one in control.
Yeah, you're holding the remote, so you're in charge. But I want you to imagine for a second that the glowing rectangle you're staring at isn't a window into a story at all.
Which is a pretty wild thought.
Right. Imagine it is actually a grinder, like a massive, invisible cognitive millstone.
Oh, wow.
And your attention, your worldview, your capacity for empathy, your very psyche, you are the grain being methodically ground down between two massive, crushing stones.
It is a deeply unsettling image, isn't it?
It really is.
Because it just completely inverts the foundational way we view our relationship with modern media.
Right. We just operate on this assumption that we're the consumers.
Exactly. Like, we buy the subscription so we consume the product. But the perspective we're unpacking today argues the exact opposite.
Which is kind of terrifying.
It is. Because it says we aren't the consumers. We are the ones being consumed. Or, more accurately, we're being processed.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a truly provocative, basically paradigm-shifting argument about the modern media ecosystem.
It really shifts how you look at everything you watch.
It does. And our core mission today is to uncover how this ecosystem functions as that exact cognitive mill, grinding the audience between two deeply manipulative extremes.
Right.
But before we really get into the gears of this machine, I need to lay some quick ground rules for you listening.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea, given the topic.
Yeah, because the material we're analyzing today, it dives into some highly politically charged territory.
It does not hold back.
No, it doesn't. It specifically calls out the tendencies of conservative media, the extremes of, like, hyper-politically correct or PC culture, and heavily controversial dark television themes.
All the hot-button issues.
Exactly. So I need to clearly tell you, we are not taking sides or endorsing the viewpoints of this content.
Right, we're just messengers here.
Our goal is simply to impartially unpack the ideas contained in the original source material so you can understand the argument being made.
And the central argument here represents a massive shift in how we understand the very purpose of a screen.
How so?
Well, historically, the primary function of art, whether it was a play, a novel, early cinema, it was to reflect life.
To hold a mirror up to things.
Exactly. To hold a mirror up to our shared, messy, complicated human experience. But the premise we're looking at today posits that mass media has quietly abandoned that mirror.
It's not reflecting us anymore.
No, it's morphed into an instrument of social engineering.
Wow. Social engineering.
Yeah. And to achieve this engineering, the viewer is being aggressively corralled into one of two heavily curated camps.
And those are the two grinding stones.
Right. Media that is either overly sterile or media that is overly destructive. There's just no middle ground.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with that first massive stone in the cognitive mill, the overly sterile extreme.
Yes.
The term the source uses here is the anesthesia effect. And I have to admit, when I first looked at this, my immediate reaction was defensive.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Because this is the content that lulls us into a profoundly false sense of security. It's what the source calls the fake paradise design.
That is the perfect term for it, actually.
Right.
Yeah, this overly sterile content, which is often heavily shaped by either traditional conservative frameworks or, on the flip side, hyper-PC sensibilities, it's defined entirely by what it aggressively excludes.
All about what's missing.
Exactly. It doesn't just minimize tragedy, it conceptually erases it. It removes complex moral contradictions. It sanitizes away the friction of real human struggle.
So it's not realistic at all.
No, in this curated reality, the lion and the gazelles aren't just coexisting. They're literally sitting at the same cafe table splitting a croissant.
That's hilarious. But also,
there is zero social injustice. There's no individual darkness. It is an utterly frictionless universe.
But I have to push back on this a little, or, at least play devil's advocate for the listener who is probably thinking exactly what I'm thinking.
Go for it.
Life is exhausting.
It really is.
The real world is full of friction, inflation, political gridlock, terrible news every day.
Constant stress.
Right. So if I want to spend my Friday night watching, say, a baking competition where the absolute highest stakes are a collapsed souffle.
The horror.
Right. Or a cozy mystery where the world is perfectly neatly resolved in 42 minutes. Why is that a bad thing?
That's a totally fair question.
Escapism isn't a new concept, right? Why is this suddenly being labeled as social engineering?
The distinction really lies in the sheer scale of consumption and the underlying psychological mechanics at play.
Okay.
There's a big difference between temporarily resting your mind and systemically sedating it.
Sedating it.
Yeah. When you consume a relentless diet of this fake paradise content, it ceases to be mere entertainment.
It becomes something else entirely.
It begins to act as a psychological anesthetic. By constantly feeding the brain these frictionless pink fairy tales, your individual psychological landscape actually physically and structurally adapts.
Wait, physically?
Yeah, you begin to lose the cognitive friction required to process nuance.
Okay, so if I understand this right, it's almost like a dietary deficiency.
Exactly like that.
It's like if I eat a diet of nothing but pure cotton candy, it feels amazing in the moment.
Sure does.
It's sweet, it's instantly rewarding, and it feels completely safe.
Yeah.
But metabolically, I am starving my immune system.
You're building absolutely zero biological resistance.
Right. So when a real virus hits me, or taking it out of the metaphor, when a sudden real-world tragedy or a complex social conflict hits me, I have zero antibodies.
None.
I'm left completely defenseless because my media diet has essentially gaslit me into believing that viruses don't exist.
That is precisely the mechanism. You're artificially suppressing your psychological immune system.
That is wild.
And if we look at the intent behind this architecture, the goal of this overly sterile content isn't your personal happiness or your relaxation.
What is it then?
It is pacification.
Pacification?
Yeah. A pacified public is a predictable public.
Oh, I see.
If the media you consume never models how to handle grief or how to navigate profound ideological disagreement or how to confront injustice,
Then you don't know what to do when it happens.
Exactly. When you inevitably encounter those things in the real world, your default neurological response is paralysis.
Because you literally lack the framing to process it.
Right. So you just shut down. You become passive.
Which is terrifying when you stop and calculate how many hours of this feel-good content we stream specifically to escape our daily stress.
Hours and hours.
We tell ourselves we're just self-soothing, but we're actually self-sedating.
Lowering our own resistance.
Yeah, but of course that cotton candy is only one half of the cognitive mill.
Right. The other stone.
Because if one side of the media ecosystem puts you into a medically induced sleep, the other side throws you headfirst into a meat grinder.
Yes. The overly destructive extreme.
This one is rough.
It is. And what makes this extreme so incredibly insidious is the camouflage it wears.
What do you mean by camouflage?
Well, the sterile content at least presents itself as lighthearted. This destructive extreme heavily markets itself as prestige or realism.
Oh man, here's where it gets really interesting. Because they slap the label of gritty realism on these shows, but it's actually not real at all, is it?
Not even a little bit.
The argument here is that this operates as a massive normalization operation.
Normalization, exactly.
It methodically takes extreme violence, severe substance abuse, deep psychological trauma, incest, and brutal sadistic crime, and it shoves them into the viewer's face in almost every single episode.
Relentlessly.
It takes the absolute furthest, darkest fringes of human depravity and centers them as just another Tuesday in the universe of the show.
And it achieves this by exploiting a very specific biological loophole in the human nervous system.
A loophole?
Yeah, we have to look at the dopaminergic pathways and the HPA axis. That's the body's stress response system.
Okay, the stress response.
Digital platforms use these extreme destructive narratives to trigger dopamine through sheer unadulterated shock value.
Wow.
When you're sitting on your couch and you witness a sudden, hyper-realistic, horrific act of violence on your screen, your primitive brain, your amygdala, doesn't immediately know it's fake.
It thinks it's real life.
Exactly. It triggers a literal fight-or-flight response. Your cortisol spikes, your heart rate elevates, your pupils dilate.
You are biologically hijacked.
Hijacked is the perfect word.
It's like voluntarily living inside a haunted house attraction 24/7.
Constantly on edge.
Yeah. Your body is physically reacting to these jump scares and these grotesque, traumatic scenes as if there's an actual physical threat standing in your living room.
Which is exhausting.
Right. You're burning through your adrenal reserves. You aren't experiencing reality or, like, profound art. You're just experiencing a sustained panic attack disguised as prestige television.
And over time, that has to completely exhaust your nervous system.
I mean, it doesn't just exhaust it, it fundamentally recalibrates it, right?
It really does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you start to see the deliberate utility of this programming.
So it's intentional.
Oh, absolutely. Keeping a viewer in a constant state of adrenaline and cortisol isn't about telling a deeply moving story about the human condition
It's a calculated
that
tactic.
could compel attention. It's the proverbial car crash. You just cannot look away because your brain is hardwired to monitor threats.
And the media companies know this.
They absolutely do. But the psychological impact of this constant exposure is what the source terms the dark injection effect.
The dark injection.
Yes, it leaves the viewer profoundly, systemically hopeless. It implants a deep subconscious architecture that the world is an unlivable, terrible, irredeemable place.
And think about the behavioral knock-on effects of that.
It's huge.
Like, if your worldview has been carefully shaped to believe that society is fundamentally irredeemable and everyone is secretly a monster, why would you bother trying to improve it?
Right. Why would you vote?
Exactly. Why would you volunteer at a local food bank? Why would you trust your neighbors enough to build a community?
You wouldn't.
It breeds a different flavor of paralysis than the sterile content. But the end result is exactly the same. Paralysis.
You're just frozen in terror instead of frozen in a sugar coma.
Which forces us to look at the architecture of the system itself.
We have to.
If both of these extremes, the overly sterile and the overly destructive, are so demonstrably damaging to our psychology, we have to ask, why are balanced, ethical, human stories disappearing?
Who or what is pulling levers here?
Right, because my instinct is to just say, well, it's just the free market, supply and demand, give the people what they want.
That's what they tell us.
Right, but that assumes a neutral marketplace. And the marketplace of modern media is anything but neutral.
No, it is not.
It is governed entirely by the invisible engine of the cognitive mill.
The algorithm.
Exactly. This brings us to the reality of data-driven polarization.
Okay, let's get into the data.
We tend to anthropomorphize algorithms, right? Like
Yeah.
thinking they have a preference or a specific political agenda.
Yeah, we give them personalities.
But they don't have personalities. They have mathematical weight vectors.
Yeah,
And algorithms absolutely devour extremes.
they love the edges.
They do. Extremely sterile content is highly efficient. It consolidates very specific, easily targeted audiences who want that predictable safe harbor, which makes them incredibly easy to serve highly targeted advertisements to.
Bingo. And on the other end, highly destructive content creates massive, explosive global engagement through pure shock effect.
Right, people flood social media to tweet about the gruesome plot twist.
They share the scandalous clip, they generate outrage. The algorithm measures success purely in terms of engagement metrics and retention.
So what happens to the middle ground? Like, what happens to the stories about normal people navigating complex but manageable moral dilemmas?
The gray area, which ironically is where 99% of actual reasonable human experience takes place, is heavily penalized by the system.
Penalized.
Yes. In the mathematical eyes of the algorithm, the nuanced, complex middle ground is categorized as simply boring.
Wow.
A balanced ethical story doesn't trigger a massive dopamine spike. It doesn't trigger a cortisol-fueled fight-or-flight response.
So it doesn't keep you glued to the screen.
Right. It doesn't maximize session length or screen time. And because it lacks that biological hook, its visibility is actively downranked and reduced by the system.
So what does this all mean for us?
It means we've fundamentally misunderstood our role in this transaction.
We aren't the audience.
Yeah.
We are the raw material.
Exactly.
I mean, it sounds like the algorithm is basically a ruthless bouncer at a club, and it's actively kicking out anyone who just wants to have a normal, nuanced human conversation.
That's a great analogy.
Like, if you aren't screaming in sheer terror on the dance floor or sleeping peacefully in the corner, the bouncer does not want you in the club. You're bad for the metrics.
And this raises a critical point about the attention economy.
Right.
The frameworks we are discussing make one thing abundantly clear. Media giants do not care about the viewer's mental health.
They don't factor it in at all.
No, they don't factor in the social fabric or civic duty either. Their singular overriding metric of success is retention.
Just keeping eyes on the screen.
Exactly. How many minutes, how many hours can they harvest from your lifespan today?
Harvesting lifespan. That's dark.
The imagery used to describe this dynamic in the source is incredibly stark. It suggests that the algorithm treats humans in only two ways:
What are they?
Either as lab rats being drowned in dark, traumatic stimuli to measure their twitch responses, or as children being put to sleep with simplistic fairy tales to keep them quiet.
Neither of which is a particularly dignified way for a human being to exist.
Not at all.
Which kind of moves us from the cold mechanics of the algorithms to the ultimate profound cost paid by you, the listener.
The real cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what's really being extracted here isn't just your Friday night. It isn't just your attention span or your subscription fee.
No, it goes much deeper.
This two-pronged attack, the anesthesia and the dark injection, is targeting something much more fundamental.
It is targeting your free will.
Yes. And this is the absolute crux of the social engineering argument.
It really is. Human free will is entirely predicated on our ability to perceive reality accurately, weigh variables, and make conscious choices based on that reality.
But when you're caught in this cognitive mill, your filtering capacity, your ability to process and evaluate the world, it rapidly degrades.
Exactly. Viewers are losing the ability to distinguish whether what they're watching is a genuine artwork meant to reflect a truth, or a deliberate lifestyle injection meant to subtly program their baseline behavior.
And when that line blurs, cognitive dominance is lost.
You don't even realize you're being programmed.
You just think you're developing edgy new tastes in television. Or that you're just, really into cozy shows lately.
You internalize the programming as your own personality.
Precisely. And the two extremes damage your filtering capacity in distinct but complementary ways.
Yeah, let's break that down.
Okay, so constant exposure to the overly destructive content causes profound desensitization. It results in empathy death.
An empathy death.
Yeah. You can see a real harrowing tragedy on the evening news, and you feel absolutely nothing.
Because your nervous system has already processed 100 artificially worse atrocities on your streaming app that week.
Exactly. Your empathy reserves are bankrupt.
Wow.
And on the flip side, constant exposure to the overly sterile, frictionless content causes reality distortion.
Right, the fake paradise.
Yeah. Your baseline for reality becomes so incredibly warped and coddled that even the slightest real-world disagreement,
Like a small argument at work.
right, the smallest bit of friction with a neighbor or a coworker feels like a catastrophic, unmanageable attack. You lose all emotional resilience.
It creates a perfectly managed population.
It does.
You have a segment of society that is completely numb to actual horror, and another segment that is utterly paralyzed by minor inconveniences.
Almost like a cognitive remote control.
It's a scary thought.
They press the red button to pump you full of dark injections, making you outrageously angry, paranoid, and completely desensitized to your fellow citizens.
And then they press the blue button to give you the anesthesia, making you completely apathetic, passive, and asleep.
But the terrifying part is, either way, they have the remote, you don't.
And that is the true meaning of social engineering in this context.
It's not a conspiracy theory.
No, it isn't guys in dark suits in a smoky back room dictating policy. It is the quiet, voluntary surrender of your own cognitive autonomy under the guise of prestige, entertainment, and relaxation.
You're being managed.
The logical endpoint is a society entirely curated by mass media, where individuals cannot even independently decide for themselves what to be angry about.
Or what to care deeply about, or what to submit to. The reactions are entirely pre-programmed by the stimuli they've been fed. Okay, I'm not going to lie, that is an incredibly bleak picture.
It is very dark.
If we stop there, we're just leaving everyone in the meat
Do we
grind.
want to do that?
No.
Yeah.
But there is a thematic resolution here. There is a way out of the trap that doesn't involve moving to a cabin in the woods and throwing all your screens into a river.
Thankfully.
Right. It brings it all back to how we, as active listeners and viewers, can break the machine and regain our autonomy.
Yes, the solution isn't technological regression. It isn't a prohibitionist mindset where we ban all media or heavily censor content.
Right. We're not talking about censorship.
The solution is about regaining art's true historical function, the mirror function.
The mirror. I really love that analogy.
It's powerful.
Because true art, genuine storytelling, is neither overly sterile nor overly destructive.
Right.
It doesn't smooth out life's harsh realities or pretend that pain, grief, and conflict don't exist.
But it also doesn't deliberately rot life.
Exactly. It doesn't wallow in the mud just to prove how dirty the world is. It doesn't revel in absolute hopelessness.
The core concept here is that Art is a mirror that should reflect the entirety of the human condition.
The whole spectrum.
Yes, it should absolutely show evil and darkness, but it should do so in a way that allows us to understand it, process it, and avoid it in our own lives.
And it should show profound good, virtue, and triumph.
So that we can be inspired by it and cling to it. It provides the full spectrum. It lives entirely in that gray area that the algorithms have deemed too computationally inefficient to promote.
So the goal for you, listening to this right now, is to become what the source calls the conscious viewer of the future.
The conscious viewer.
This is a profoundly empowering shift.
Mm.
You don't need to petition the government to ban a show.
You don't need to cancel your subscriptions.
You just need to see the matrix for what it actually is.
Awareness is key.
When you sit down and turn on a show, you need to cultivate the filtering capacity to say, I see what this is. This is a dark injection attempting to trigger my dopamine and cortisol pathways.
Or, okay, this is a fake paradise design attempting to pacify me into a sugar coma.
Right. By simply recognizing the mechanics of the trap, you diffuse it.
You do?
You save your own mind from being a laboratory testing ground. You revoke your status as the lab rat.
Reclaiming your autonomy requires active, intentional consumption.
It takes effort.
It means purposefully seeking out that gray area. It means choosing to engage with stories that challenge your worldview without traumatizing your nervous system.
And finding stories that comfort you without lying to you about the nature of reality.
Exactly. It's about rebuilding that psychological immune system through balanced exposure.
Stories that actually reflect humanity, with all its beautiful, messy, complicated, and entirely unalgorithmic nuance.
That's the goal.
So we've unpacked the invisible gears of the cognitive mill. We've seen the grinding stones of the anesthesia effect and the dark injection.
You covered a lot today.
We really did. We've looked at the cold, retention-obsessed mathematics of the algorithms pulling the levers and the invisible battle being waged for your free will and your filtering capacity.
It's a lot to mull over.
It is. Next time you finally drop onto that couch, grab the remote, and feel that absolute magnetic compulsion to binge watch whatever new show is trending at the top of your feed.
Just pause.
Yeah, just pause for 1 single second. Check your pulse. Literally and metaphorically. Ask yourself, are you choosing to watch this because this story reflects your shared humanity and challenges you to grow?
Or are you just a lab rat in a very comfortable cage?
Right, pressing the lever for another hit of adrenaline or another dose of anesthesia. Between the sterile cotton candy and the digital meat grinder, whose reality are you actually living in?